Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gold Standard with Alan Mosley, and here's your host, Alan Mosley.
Thank you so much, and welcome back to the Gold Standard for episode 15. 15. So it's almost like a real show.
Almost.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
Wait, I've said this to you before, so we're no longer from beautiful Columbia, Tennessee.
No.
But we're still the Gold Standard.
We're still the Gold Standard.
Okay.
But
okay, I'm just making sure.
Well, are you saying Columbia's not beautiful anymore?
Like we need to make more enemies.
I know.
So thank you so much for being back with us. If you want to follow us on social media, facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. You can get me on Twitter, which is @AlanMMosley, and our website, which I say every single week, it's really the only thing I should announce, is thegoldstandardpodcast.com. And this week we have an excellent guest. All the way back on, what was it, like episode 3 or 4, I had actually made the comment that, you know, we need to have somebody who really knows their stuff when it comes to the crypto world.
Yeah.
Because I know a little bit about it, but I really don't consider myself an authority on the issue.
Right.
And today our prayers have been answered in a big, big way.
Good.
Today's guest is editorial director for the American Institute for Economic Research. He's the author of many thousands of articles in the scholarly and popular press, and 8 books in 5 languages, but not 6. We're getting there.
Not 6.
He speaks widely on topics of economics, technology, social philosophy, and culture. And poor fellow today has to talk to complete morons about cryptocurrency. Jeffrey Tucker is with us today. Jeffrey, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. It's good to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much. We had just said right before the show, so you're in Massachusetts. I had mistaken. I thought you were down in Atlanta right now at the Bitcoin Embassy. Is that...
I hop back and forth. I mean, Atlanta's my home, and then my office is here in Great Barrington, which is sort of Edith Wharton country. I mean, it's a very interesting place. You go to a bar at night, you walk in, and the sign says, you know, established 1740, you know, and you're like, wow, okay. Yeah. And you know, the floors and the restaurants are all kind of cobblestone, and, you know, it's the old world. It's actually kind of striking. This part of the country was populated, you know, before the American Revolution, but it became a kind of area of high prestige during the Gilded Age, when, you know, the coal would start in West Virginia, get refined in Pittsburgh, and then the robber barons, so-called, you know, the really wealthy at the time, would move up to Rhode Island to establish their city residences. But when they wanted to go to the country, they would come to the Berkshires, and that's Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And rolling hills, endless estates. The estate where the American Institute for Economic Research lives is, I don't know. I don't know. It seems like it's 2 square miles. I don't know, but it includes a lake and a castle, and, you know, it's just a different world.
See, Jeffrey, we're from Columbia, Tennessee, which every year, it actually was just a couple of weeks ago, every year we have a week-long festival called Mule Day, because Columbia is self-styled as the mule capital of the world. So see, it's practically the same level of culture and excellence. Practically the same thing. So you had just mentioned, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up the browser here, editorial director of AIER, the American Institute for Economic Research, and for people at home, that is www.aier.org, and I've also got up /staff/Jeffrey-Tucker, where they can find an absolute treasure trove of the articles that you've written that are featured there.
I write every single day. I just, before this phone call, I just posted an article about the drinking age, you know, and the absolute scandal associated with this, and the fact that there's like no political debate about it at all, and just how incredibly corrupting it is. I was especially annoyed, you know, to read about. There was a bar in Connecticut, I guess, that Friday night the cops went in and arrested 103 people for underage drinking. And, you know, we continue to pretend as if this is an enforceable law. I mean, it's ridiculous. And my argument is that, like, the solution here are the bars, and arresting people for drinking in public bars is only going to drive it to the frat houses essentially, and to the dorm rooms and to the private homes where people binge drink and get themselves in trouble. But this is the nature of our country. We have a prohibitionist mindset. We always have. And we can't come to terms somehow with the fact that just because government says people shouldn't do something doesn't mean that people aren't going to do it anyway, And so as a result, the drinking age law is the most disobeyed law in the whole country. And I think we just need to adopt the standard that's widely accepted all over Europe and the Middle East and Australia and Latin America, which is 16 for wine and beer, and 18 for liquor, but also very light enforcement. I think it's the much more humane way.
Now hold on, I'm going to challenge you here for a second. So is the most disobeyed law underage drinking, or is it speed limits?
Well, the speed limits are. I would say drinking because you get enough cops on the road and people will obey the speed limit, actually, and especially with the new GPS technologies that are always telling you where the cops are. Yeah. I find that I'm much more compliant with the speed limit now than I ever have been, just because I don't want to be stopped by the cops. God, the flashing lights in the rearview mirror. Who looks at those and goes, I'm so glad to see that the police are keeping our roads safe. A public servant is about to approach me and I get to encounter the thin blue line. Nobody thinks that. All you do is think, oh, God, I hope they don't search my car, or find something wrong with my paperwork. I've twice had handcuffs slapped on me when being stopped for things like, a taillight being out, and spent the day in jail, for silly reasons. And so and also, like, even if it goes just fine and the officer gives you a warning or something like that, it's just something degrading about being lorded over by another human being for no particular reason. Some armed guy who if he doesn't like the way that you're talking to him can shoot you in the head.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to experience that. I don't want to be reminded that I'm a slave.
True.
Yeah. Well, you were just mentioning over 100 people arrested recently in a underage drinking sting. I don't even know if that's the right terminology for it, but it's for me. It always goes back to even if we all mutually agreed that that was a worthwhile expenditure of our security forces as opposed to solving rapes and murders and thefts or things of that nature. Even if we agreed with that, and even if we agreed that we didn't want people below, say, 21 drinking, it's just hard for me to fathom that potentially rounding up that group of kids, really, and throwing them in cages is really going to solve society's ills as opposed to make them much worse.
The bars are the solution. What you need is public access to public drinking places where people can be safe, where bartenders can say, I think you've had one too many, where there are adults present, and there's some accountability. But you take that same scene and put it in frat houses and private homes, rental properties, and dorm rooms, and it becomes the Lord of the Flies. It's terrible. That's when the binging takes place. That's why we have a campus rape problem. It breeds terrible social pathology. So the bars are a solution. Fake IDs are a solution. Parents should actually send their kids off to college with fake IDs. And they should figure out a way to facilitate a fake ID for their kid, because this fake ID is going to keep them safe, because that's what allows them to go to the bars and the restaurants and be in safe spaces. If you don't have a fake ID, they're going to drink anyway, and they're going to be drawn to these really actually dangerous situations where there's no adult supervision, where people are binge drinking and free and away from their parents for the first time and interested in sexual experimentation, and it creates really just human tragedies all around. So a fake ID is a way to protect yourself. you know, and your
I've
child.
never heard it put that way before.
This is such an interesting segue in the episode that I wasn't expecting. But I want to stay on this for a second. You just reminded me when I was first in school, I went to a liberal arts school out in East Tennessee called Maryville College, and around that same time they had actually left it to a campus-wide vote on whether or not to make their campus a dry campus. And one of the main argue points for the side that wanted to vote to allow alcohol on campus was that we're 20 minutes down the road from UT Knoxville, and for anybody who knows anything about UT, it's a bit of a party school, to put it lightly. And the argument is that, well, what would you prefer if we just understand that people are going to do what they want to do, and we understand that these kids are going to go get beer and they're going to drink? Would you rather them be drinking and driving back and forth from UT Knoxville, or would you rather them just bring it home and drink on campus? And they ultimately decided to allow alcohol on the campus, and I genuinely believe that was the right decision based on that line of thinking.
Absolutely is. I mean, you need alcohol on campus, you need bars on campus, you need dance clubs on campus, and if you don't have that, I can promise you there's going to be rental properties all over town where these stupid, I mean, by the way, 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids are pathologically insane universally. So they go to the big box hardware store and buy rubber trash cans, fill them up with ice, and dump as much Everclear in as they can, and cover it up with sweetened grape juice and call it a party. I mean, it's disgraceful, and we're living in times where college kids think it's completely normal to black out. I mean, nobody blacks out. I mean, that's crazy. But today, your typical 20-year-old, I bet he's probably had 12 blackout experiences. Like, who does this? Yeah. You wake up in somebody's house, you don't remember how you got there. It's insane. This is not the right civilized way to drink. No. We need kids drinking from the age of 16, or even 14 or younger, around their parents, and learn to do it with discipline and civility, and not daring do with rapey sexual agendas. I mean, that's where we are right now, mm-hmm. and it's disgusting. And the problem with young workers now, they get out of college, they think this is normal to binge drink and black out all the time. They think that's a party. And then they can't function in the workplace anymore, Mm-hmm. They continue to drink this way. They can't associate drinking and civility anymore. Drinking is, for them, associated with the most egregious form of human misbehavior you can imagine. And this is all consequences of the drinking laws. So when I see these sting operations where they go in, you got an ID, I mean, to me, it's a tragedy, and we should cry when things like that happen. It's like, no, the bars are the solutions. The ID checkers that look past the fake IDs. That is the solution. The people who make the fake IDs, they are heroes. They're protecting young people from egregious corruption and degradation. But anyway, something's got to change. I mean, it should be a major agenda. The real tragedy here is that everybody between the ages of 18 and 21 know this. Everybody knows this, right? But once they turn 21, they lose sympathy for the people who've gone before, because they're like, oh, okay, I'm in. I made it through it. And so there's no lobbying force for repealing these egregious laws. Like, there's none whatsoever, because young people between the age of 18 and 21 never want to talk about it, right? They never want to raise the reality of their world, which is just sloshed in liquor and binging, and it's this whole ritualistic pre-gaming, and the whole thing is horrible, but they keep it in secret, so they never talk about it. So they're not going to lobby to change the laws. And then once people get turn 21, they lose all sympathy for the people who came before. So we're stuck with this roaring 20s prohibition-style culture that lives in the world's most dangerous age group, that are completely unsupervised by their parents and been given, unlimited resources through student loans and daddy's credit card. I mean, what are we doing? This is a disaster.
Well, you've
never even thought of that.
You've touched on so we're not going to do crypto. We're throwing that out. We got other stuff to talk about today. So you've touched on a couple of social phenomenon that I think are really interesting. The first one being that when it comes to learning to drink responsibly, doing it at home with parents before you go out into the world, there's something to be said there for that's just, specifically about alcohol consumption. That's just one of many ways that you can be passing down the virtue of personal responsibility to your children while they're still in the nest, so to speak. And then another thing that you touched on is, you said that once the kid reaches 21, that now they're in the legal age and they no longer have that sympathy for those that they literally just left behind. It seems like there's this weird phenomenon, going back, using the same analogy of being pulled over by the cops for speeding or whatever, that the same people who will roll their eyes when they see the lights behind them and think, oh, geez, why me? Why today? Why this? This is ridiculous. I shouldn't be treated this way. Those same people will point and laugh when they see someone else pulled over, like, serves them right.
Yeah. And I'm over that. I know exactly what you mean, because I remember feeling that myself, like, haha. But actually, I feel great sympathy for anybody being pulled over, and I curse. I go by the cop and go, like, why don't you just leave people alone? Because they're not a danger. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I would say 90% of police work in this country is actually destructive to social order. Actually. And these bar crackdowns. I mean, by the way, there's something else just horrible about the way these drinking age laws have outsourced the policing function to merchants. It's not the job of a merchant to decline to sell things that they specialize in selling. They want to sell them, and yet we've forced them, drafted them to become kind of agents of the state. I mean, that's just grim. And here's the other amazing irony of it. Anybody who lives around a college campus knows that there's a very active bar life around college campus. I mean, they depend fundamentally on underage drinking. 17.3% of liquor consumption in this country, or in terms of the economics of not quantity, but the GDP, I guess you could say, of the liquor industry, is due to underage drinking. So it's a hugely important market segment. So these bars are absolutely dependent upon underage drinkers coming in and passing themselves off in some way with a fake ID or something. And yet they're also being constantly told, now you got to enforce the drinking laws, Mm-hmm. And they're being threatened all the time. So if they let in an underage drinker and the enforcement cops show up at the wrong time, they could get their whole bar shut down. I mean, the whole thing has created moral hazards and tragedies in all directions. And I am just personally appalled that we're not even having a discussion about this. This is something that affects every single human life in America at some point. And has ever since the law was changed in 1984. And it's bred, as I said, terrible social pathology, is destroying lives all over the place, and yet we don't even talk about, I can't even remember a single time in any political debate when the subject has come up. Not even once. I don't remember ever reading an article about this subject, except for when I write about it, which is once every couple of years. I mean, I write about it just because I think it's so important and nobody else is writing about it, Mm-hmm. And I wish we could have a genuine political debate about this. I mean, it's amazing to me that we're talking about legalization of marijuana, which I very much approve of and appreciate, and I like to see the liberalization taking place, but actually the drinking age laws are even more destructive of human life than the laws against weed.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it sort of brings up the rhetorical question, if I would even call it that you hear people say that politics is downstream of culture, so you have to kind of have that cultural conversation of what is and isn't important and where people's virtues lie.
And that's where the problem is. People are not willing to have the conversation because they don't want to tell mom and dad that they're drinking. Yeah. They'll go home at Thanksgiving and say, yeah, some of my friends drink, I don't. Oh, sure. You know what? Your kid is lying.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well,
so nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, we've developed this weird speakeasy culture, where everybody lives to booze it up, and they also live to lie about it. Also, what an outrage!
Well, that kind of brings me to a different but similar, social philosophy that sometimes I think people don't understand just how powerful a movement can be when a general population decides they don't respect a particular edict or a particular law. And we look at marijuana decriminalization going on right now, that when there's that critical mass of the population that just says, well, I simply don't give any respect to this rule because I don't agree with it, therefore I'm going to ignore it. And then all of a sudden, some years down the road, you see the cracks in the wall and you see, legislation being passed. So I think so that gets me to the rhetorical question of, so how do we as thinking individuals attack this from a cultural standpoint to get people to see not just I want to smoke a doobie, therefore we're going to attack marijuana legislation, but more the abstract of, how do we get people to understand, yes, but if enough of us just take the stance of we're going to be responsible for ourselves and people can't tell us what to do with our bodies, then instead of us hitting one little issue, one little substance at a time, it's just a blanket proposal of we're not going to have this conversation anymore because it's not your place to have that conversation.
Yeah,
it's not the state's place.
That's a really interesting point. Like, how do you get across the general principle? My guess is that the general principle usually emerges in the aftermath of a series of discrete failures followed by solutions, and then the conclusion is, maybe let's draw a general lesson. People should be free. People should be permitted to ingest whatever they want. But I think that probably comes after repeated failures. I mean, this is where freedom came from initially. I mean, in the High Middle Ages, I mean, the modern idea of freedom just didn't exist before we began to play around, toy with, and experiment with the idea of religious liberty. Like, maybe we should stop burning people at the stake for having the wrong views about transubstantiation, and just let people believe whatever they want. And guess what? It worked. And so then liberty gradually got folded out from there. Well, what about speech? What about press? What about free trade? What about free association? Maybe we should even consider getting rid of slavery. Maybe women have rights too, and so on and so on. And it took hundreds of years to get to this point. And then finally, we had this general principle, articulated in the Declaration of Independence or in non-aggression principle or whatever. But usually the general principle comes after a series of practical failures. So I have no problem with people just arguing for the practical case for example, lowering the drinking age. And every time I write about the subject, by the way, I get libertarians writing me going, well, how come you're saying 16 and not just eliminate it completely? All right, so let me be clear. I don't think the state should regulate this at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, this should be regulated by social institutions, families, colleges, proprietors, bars, and so I think we're going to be much more. I don't think there should be any laws about drinking whatsoever.
See, it's funny. I identify as a libertarian, and I love the libertarian community for as kooky as it sometimes can be. But I've actually made the criticism recently of a lot of libertarians, we'll put that in quotation marks, or even big L libertarians, that it seems to me that we should not assume that people understand the principles that underline our position on issues like this. Because I think a lot of people in modern political conversation genuinely do just jump from one issue to the next to the next. There's no coherent philosophy behind why they believe what they believe. It's more kind of like the modern congressional way of going about things, that, well, whatever the rabble's about today, we'll rule on that one issue, and then we'll go another 6 months of doing nothing, and we'll rule on one issue. But,
I know.
But there's no underlying base that determines why we all have now decided that X is right or Y is wrong. It's just, today it's just X or just Y. There's no everything. And I mean, and I'm not necessarily saying that we've necessarily failed in any way, just more that we have to figure out a clever way of expanding that conversation into the abstract.
Yeah, it's so true. We also face a real problem in the country right now. I've discerned this coming for like maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. But there's a kind of a new weird Puritanism that struck America, like a lot of strange pearl clutching going on about substances. You know, like I mean, just this morning, Jesus, the New York Times podcast, I couldn't believe it. So Trump has appointed this doctor, this White House physician, for Obama and himself and maybe one of the president to head the Veterans Affairs, but his nomination is being shot down, and the reason is because I just can't believe I heard this morning. They said he was once found drinking on the job. Okay, what? I mean, when is a White House doctor on the job? Is it 24/7? You know, I don't know. And the story is that he went on some trip, you know, and was seen at a bar or something. They found him, you know, drinking too much or something, and somebody had a medical problem. Well, presumably it wasn't the only doctor around, so I don't know. And the idea that we're going to insist that somehow the White House physician be a teetotaler, I mean, give me a break. And the other accusation against the guy was, and this one I couldn't believe, they said, oh, he's distributing narcotics freely to White House staff and others. Oh, really? But like what? Well, once he was on an international flight, and he handed out Ambien pills to everyone, which are just sleeping aids. They're sleep aids, right? But which you have to get through a prescription, which itself is outrageous. I mean, you should be able to buy Ambien at the store like you can in most any country in the world. So he's handing them out. He's a physician, you know, with license to do this, and he's giving people Ambien because they're on an international trip and it's advantageous to sleep, you know. So he's just being a doctor, and Michael Barbaro, whom I love otherwise, you know, is acting like some sort of schoolmarmy guy, like he's all shocked. He gave drugs out to people on the airport. Drugs? Yeah, just handing them out to everybody. So, well, clearly that disqualifies him. You know? So what are you talking about? This is called doing your job. But I don't know, we have this selective moralizing we're engaging in these days, you know?
Very selective.
And
it's hitting every area of life.
You just hit the nail on the head right there at the end about the selective moralizing. That going back to the people that say, "Aha, look at him," that got pulled over on the side of the road. That once again, the same people that may, in at least certain areas, be sympathetic to us on self-determination and natural rights, people being able to take what they want, do what they want, as long as they're not hurting other people. Some of those same people will then throw the rules in someone's face if they're a political opponent, and they in this I gotcha game. That's the game in town now, right? Like we don't really have politics or debate anymore. We have the I gotcha game.
It's what you always say. It's to stick to your principles. And when people change their principles to modify their agenda, it just throws all their credibility out the window.
Well, that's true, and especially when it comes to politics, when there's a political agenda. I mean, it's been very interesting to me what's happened over the last couple of years, because you've got a lot of feminists that are very upset that Trump, you know, who they despise, is the president. So they decided to take it out on their anger out on the existence of men in general, you know, and so now you know, you turn on the radio and it's like, well, something very bad has happened to this otherwise famous and previously highly revered man. It turns out he made an improper and unwanted advance against a woman. Like, wait, he flirted with somebody one time?
Yeah.
Are we really gonna, you know? I mean, is this really 1880? You know, at the height of the Victorian age, where, you know, an improper. Think about the word improper. Oh, there's proper and there's improper. Yeah. And now we expect everybody to behave properly, and every advance must be wanted. Oh, an unwanted advance. What are we talking about here? I mean, have we never experienced life itself, read any literature at all, ever experienced love poetry or listened to a pop song? What is this? Yeah. We're inventing these weird moral standards like on the fly. And as you say, in the name of politics mainly, but it's destroying human relationships and people's lives all over the place as a result of this stuff. As a result of lacking, you're right, consistent principles, we're arbitrarily making up moral systems to destroy people on political grounds for no apparent reason. Without remorse, without any kind of consistent standards, without compassion, without any kind of humane outlook on the capacity of people to manage their own lives, it's getting truly grim.
Yeah.
Now, I have to bring this up just because what you've been discussing with us, it keeps on ringing in my head. We have a regular segment that we're skipping this week, Jeffrey, but we have a regular segment on the show called Jeff Sessions Sucks. Where about every week or so we'll pull up a new article or news story about why we still firmly believe that Jeff Sessions sucks. But this whole time that you've been speaking, I've just been seeing his face in my mind.
I see it.
Well, there you go. And I know that just maybe about a month ago he had made the statement in the press that nobody needs marijuana, and in fact really nobody even needs any type of a painkiller. Where he was telling people that were suffering maybe from a cancer diagnosis or a car accident or what have you, he was telling them, well, they just need to take a couple of aspirin and suck it up. And of course, in his case, he's terrible in every conceivable way. But it's not just that he's bad on all those individual issues, but that he would have the audacity to, from a moral standpoint, to tell someone, well, if you're in just chronic terrible pain, take a couple of aspirin and suck it up. It's like, I want to say that on my show every single week because I point that to the people that may support him or may be pro-prohibition on various substances or whatever, and I just want to say, is this the moral company that you want to keep? Like, is this person, take any individual issue out of the equation, is this the kind of person that you feel represents your position? Because I think a lot of people have been programmed from DARE and Just Say No or whatever to think, well, these things are bad and wrong and they're ills of society, so we can't have them. But I want to shake people and tell them, yeah, I get that. That's what you believe. But is throwing people in cages the right thing to do? And is someone like a Jeff Sessions who, wants prosecutors to prosecute people to full extent of the law, tells people to suck it up? I have a hard time believing that people that may be opponents of ours would still feel that way when one of their loved ones is in incredible pain and lying in bed, and that you have not a cure, we're not saying a cure,
right,
but certainly
a way to help them feel better.
Yeah, I mean literally better than lying there
right,
as if it were the 1400s and they need to be bled or something, and to say, yes, but my demagogue says I can't give you this, so I'm sorry, you're going to suffer. No one no logical person would say that if it was their loved one.
Yeah, what a setback the appointment of Jeff Sessions was. And it was interesting because I think a lot of people supported Trump, imagined that he was going to cut back the role of government. I mean, I don't know why anybody thought that, but they did. Jeff Sessions just refuted that. His appointment was a disaster. I mean, this guy is, I don't know, he's from the 50s or the 40s or something like this. Yeah. I mean, he's egregious. He's in love with the police state, in love with top-down control, draconian management of society by cops and thugs like himself. It's despicable.
Do you feel, because we had touched really briefly just a moment ago, you're talking about these pearl clutching types, in it's 2018. It's the current year. How do we have this going on?
Yeah.
I'm 32 years old. I grew up in the late 80s and the 90s, and I don't ever remember the social outrage and the sort of things that we're talking about. I mean, do you feel that's a societal type thing that's cyclical and we're in a pattern and then we're going to be out of it, or do you think we're going in a really bad direction deliberately?
I think we're going in a really bad direction, and I'm glad you asked this question. I mean, I was thinking about it this morning, again, listening to Michael Barbaro, just being shocked that the White House physician would hand out Ambien on an airplane on an international flight. It's like, dude, what is wrong with you? But yeah, this kind of neo-Puritanism, it comes and goes. And you only have to look back at the writings of H.L. Mencken, in the early 1920s, and he talked about the prohibitionist, puritanical mentality that really always converts into a kind of a statism and a longing to ruin the happiness of other people through force, essentially. And that's always been a problem in American life, and it's been true since the colonial period. But it comes in waves. It comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. And then we go through a period of crackdown, and then it's followed by a period of liberality, and then outrage, followed by crackdown. And I think we're going into a new Puritanism right now, and it's both left and right. I mean, everybody seems to agree that we need more controls, more imposition, more authoritarianism, more shaming, more moralizing, and it's like I say, it's all arbitrary. Yeah. We don't even have a system for why and how we're supposed to do this. And there's like invented every single day. And now we're saying that the White House physician can never take a drink. I mean, that he can't hand out Ambien to reporters and staff on an airplane. I mean, when did that rule come about? It seems like it was made up yesterday.
Yeah,
well, it was.
Yeah, exactly, because it was. That's right. I want to switch gears because I had so many links prepared, and like this here's our crypto. Yeah, this is our cryptocurrency. That's gone. We're done with that now. So I wanted to bring up your recent book, Rightwing Collectivism: The Other Threat to Liberty, and it's available in Kindle and paperback. I want you to take a few minutes to tell us, what you mean by the book when you're talking about right-wing collectivism being a threat to liberty, and also I have a question from our friends on Reddit that are in the subreddit Gold and Black. So shout out to them. They wanted to know when more of your books, such as Right-Wing Collectivism, are going to be available in audiobook.
Well, okay. Well, I want to do the audio version. I just haven't had time. It's actually, audio is very difficult to make. It takes a long time. So I want to sit down and do that, really. And I hope to. Now that I work at AIR, we're talking about audiobooks, and I would like to get in print. Listen, that book took a lot out of me because I'm kind of a happy person. I like writing about technology and progress and fun things like this, and lifestyle hacking and these are the things that I really like to write about. Sure. But the reason I wrote the book was that when Trump came along, he was so aggressively anti-left, and people assumed that, well, I hate the left. I hate the left and its statist socialist ways. So anybody who's against the left must be a friend of mine. And it's almost like people had no consciousness of this alternative tradition of statism that really comes from the right. And it was the first speech I heard given by Trump, where he was kind of whipping up these nativist fears and really rallying around protectionism and that sort of thing. My mind went back to 1944 and Mises's book on Independent Government, where he was talking about the rise of fascism in Europe. And I wondered why it was that everybody in the audience didn't have any awareness of what Trump was saying, or that there was any kind of prehistory to this. And I think it's simply because we won World War II, and we thought we vanquished this ideology from the planet Earth to never to return. It's typical American belief, really. And so we're not educated about it at all, and we're just unaware of it. So the purpose of my book was really it is actually the first book on this topic, as far as I know, was to isolate a particular kind of rightist version of statism and trace it back to its origins in the early 19th century and march through a kind of genealogy of this ideology, where it came from and how it got worse and worse and worse over 150 years, and to isolate the thinkers that were behind it, from Hegel through Carlyle, to Madison Grant in the U.S. and Carl Schmitt in Germany and so on. So I just went through the whole tradition. And so I traced this right-wing collectivist tradition from a branch of Hegelianism all the way through to World War II. And as a way of I wanted to draw a picture of an ideology that has kind of dropped out of consciousness. I think there's a number of reasons it's dropped out. For one thing, we go to college and all the statists are on the left.
Sure.
I mean, and there's no Nazis running around on campus, as far as we can tell. So we just think that they're just a marginalized figure. So that ideological perspective, that philosophical outlook, must not matter. So there's no reason to learn anything about it. And therefore, it sort of sneaks in, it creeps in. And when the left goes too far, as it has for a very long time, people are begin to just despise it. The problem with an anti-leftist ideology that's not pro-freedom is that it can be captured and subverted and turned over to a kind of something just as dangerous, which is a right-wing collectivism. And that's what my book is about, and that's why I wrote it. The book has been it's been reviewed very favorably and sometimes unfavorably. But a lot of it comes. My biggest critics always say the same thing. They say, look, statism isn't necessarily left. It's not left and right. It's just left. Right means freedom. Left means state. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. That's not true.
Yeah.
There's two varieties of statism. And again, it traces back to Hegel. There was a left-wing Hegelian school that ended in Marx and a right-wing Hegelian school that ended in Hitler. And you can watch and that's what my book does. It just tries to isolate a sort of conservative, or really, I think more correctly, right-wing brand of social control and statism that is a particular camp. And I tried to draw a really clear picture of what this looks like, how to recognize it, and I hope if you read the book, by the end you'll be able to recognize it better and take it seriously.
Well, Jeffrey, I have such a profound respect for you, and because something that we say on the show here all the time is I never want my own show to come off as that we're just harumph, we're just grumbling about all the ills of the world, because I always say you can hear that anywhere. You can go to all sorts of programs and hear them yelling at the top of their lungs in their basements about how the world's a terrible place and everything's awful. And so I appreciate so much that your tendency is to write about things that are hopeful and good and ways that we can enrich our lives and stay on the positive. But with that said, I really feel like this is an important book, just because the older I get and the more I study, the more I tend to believe that ideas, whether they be positive or negative, can never be irrevocably defeated. Right? Like they can only suffer a loss in a battle. They can never be defeated in the war. And I would even say this to the libertarian community as well, that no matter there's that certain type of person, and I'm afraid that they might actually make up the majority of society, that sometimes people get jaded, sometimes people are looking for what their counterculture position is going to be, and maybe for some people that meant Ron Paul. Maybe for some people that meant Bernie Sanders. And those are two ideologically different things, but they were just looking for something different. And we can respect that people are upset, and we can respect that people want change. I mean, that inherently wanting change is not the issue. It's that people tend to latch on to whatever the first thing they find is that sounds attractive, that they identify as change. And maybe that can be libertarianism, albeit they may not have a good understanding of the principles. But unfortunately, it seems like this last political cycle, that change they were latching onto was protectionist and nationalism, and it's taken a very ugly turn for us as a society in a lot of ways.
It's a form of socialism. It's a really fascinating ideological outlook, because it's a form of socialism, but it's stripped of the aspects of socialism that people hate the most, namely the attack on property, the attack on religion, and the attack on the family. So what fascist-style socialism tries to do is it tries to preserve the socialist ethos while granting people the things they love, the faith, family, property, provided it serves the cause of the nation state and therefore its autocratic leader.
Sure.
And so to that extent, in a sense, right-wing collectivism has been a more successful political movement over the last 100 years than left-wing form of collectivism. But it's just as murderous and just as statist and just as anti-libertarian. So I didn't write the book for libertarians as such, but I think libertarians would benefit from it. I really wrote it so that anybody could read it and be enlightened as to this true menace to our freedoms that's out there.
Well,
and I don't, here's the other thing, I don't think that the left makes very credible criticisms against the right. I mean, I agree with a lot of what they say, but they don't have the credibility. The question is, what are you going to replace these guys with? Well, the left built the executive state, and they're mad that the wrong guy's in charge of it. Well, what are we going to do about it? Well, their only solution is impeach Trump. Well, that's not going to solve the problem. I mean, the problem is the state itself. It's not the particular managers.
I'm definitely afraid that we've already lost the war, or that we've done a very poor job of educating people on the virtues of limiting the size and scope of the state, simply because in that left-right paradigm that you were discussing, in my mind you have the right-wing monolithic state authoritarians, and then you have the left-wing monolithic state authoritarians.
That's true.
And so, in their conversation in between the right and the left, it's really just more a battle of, well, you just wait until I get my claws on that all-powerful state, then you're going to see what I'm going to do to you, my political opponents. And I feel like we've done a very poor job of educating people, that mass, that half the country that isn't politically involved at all, to understand that we've got to figure out a way to dismantle this power, because not only does it continue to grow and not only does it infringe on our liberties, but whichever side happens to be holding the grail when the hammer comes down on you, that's really irrelevant, isn't it? I mean, it's the fact that someone had it and could do it to you is what matters. Who happened to be the one in power is irrelevant.
The hopeful aspect of a lot of this stuff is that I feel like there's a sense in which we had to go through Trump in order to discover this essential truth. Politics over the last 200 years has essentially broken down into three camps: the right, the left, and the liberals, or liberalism, or libertarianism, whatever you want to call it. And that was true in England in the 19th century. So you had the Labour Party, you had the Tories, and then you had the liberals, and that's always been the case in the United States. We had we've always had, the Federalists and the highborn Federalists of the Hamiltonian type, which are basically the predecessors to National Socialism, and then you had the left, the socialists will always be with us, and then you had the Jeffersonian liberals. So what's been missing, I think, over the last 20 years, essentially in American politics, is that third way, is that group that's saying, look, we just want freedom, all right? We don't care about control from the left, we don't care about control from the right. We reject both these sides. We're a third way, and I think that's a hopeful aspect of the Trump phenomenon. I mean, like, you've probably gone through this. I think actually vast numbers have gone through this. It's like, I don't like Trump, but I like Trump's critics.
Yeah. Exactly.
We kind of deal with this reality every single day. So the question is there a place for you? Yes, there is a place for you. And it's called, traditionally it was called liberalism. Today it's called libertarianism. I wish we had a better word, but it's basically we're the third option. We're just saying, leave society alone. It's not complicated. Leave us alone and let society take its own evolution in its own shape.
Well, I'm such a hypocrite because I sit here and do a show, but I really don't listen to a ton of other programs on a regular basis. I keep up with Tom Woods, I keep up with Jason Stapleton, which I know you had an appearance with very recently.
I love Jason Stapleton.
Yeah,
he's wonderful. I love his show, and I was really excited to be on his show and hang out with him. I gave him his first Bitcoin, which made
well, there you go. Well, and part of me, because we had actually talked about doing this show and talking about crypto before you had went on with Jason, and then I listened to that episode and I thought, well, we're done. That's, I'm just going to play Jason. I'm just going to sit here in my chair and play his episode over the microphone. And
it was a great episode. I liked it too because I always knew that he was a crypto skeptic, and I especially going on those kinds of shows because I'm confident enough in my knowledge of Bitcoin and my awareness of the critics and all that kind of stuff I don't get defensive. I'm really happy to talk to anybody about it.
Yeah, well,
I feel like I kind of brought him around.
Well, I think you did as well, and the big reason why I brought up those gentlemen and their shows is just because I have heard them on multiple occasions say, I really didn't wake up this morning with the intent of defending Donald Trump. It's just that the camp that is attacking him is equally just so awful. I don't even know where to point my philosophical guns today because they're all just so bad. And so by mistake, you find yourself attacking his critics because they're equally bad.
Or worse.
I get so tired of it. Like I've been the harshest critic of Trump for like 3 years. But there's nothing I get more bored of than center-left attacks on how Trump has degraded the presidency and ruined the country and divided us and blah, 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 blah. There's like endless litany of stuff. It's like, will you shut up? Not every day is Trump done some great new, terrible evil, and the left-wing critics are so unprincipled. And if I trusted the left, to believe in freedom and that sort of thing, then I would give more credibility to the complaints. But they don't believe in freedom. They just want a different form of control. They just don't like Trump because Trump is kind of keeping them out of power. And to me, that's the best thing you could say about Trump.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a depressing thing. We're going back to that dark place again, and we're leaving our positive roots here with Jeffrey Tucker. It's such a depressing thing when you think about. It's perfectly okay for these people if their leader is a war criminal and a mass murderer. As long as he wears a well-tailored suit and he does an NCAA bracket every year for college basketball and he makes some sort of canned statement to some school kids and reads second graders. But as long as they do that, then it's okay with them being the head of, one of the most disgusting crime organizations on earth. But goodness forbid they degrade that role of mob boss by tweeting something inappropriate or whatever, like as if that's where our priorities lie now.
Oh, for sure. And the New York Times is my favorite publication. I read it, like everything in it every single day. I absolutely love it, but it drives me insane at the same time. It really does. Just too much.
I want to switch gears here real quick and bring back up the browser. It's time for our Meme of the Week segment. And it's not really even a meme so much, it's just a screenshot today. And I actually got it from your feed. It's a screenshot of the IRS. I know you can't see what we're looking at, but I'll describe it to you. It's a screenshot from the IRS Direct Pay website with their planned outage of April 17th through December 31st of 9999. And of course, the particular irony of this for everybody at home is if the IRS side is down, don't let that lead you to believe your taxes aren't due, citizen. They're still due. We're just having some technical difficulties in fleecing you today, but we'll get you tomorrow. And I know you had shared that, and I wanted to give you a second to comment on it, but it reminds.
It was ironic to me, too, that happened. So I had just the day before written an article, and I don't know if you're aware of this movement, but Elizabeth Warren. Do you know that name?
Oh, way too well.
Not only do I know it, but the way you said it describes her perfectly.
Oh, it's just there's nobody in public life who's more incorrect more consistently than Elizabeth Warren. And so one of the things she wants to do is she wants to make it illegal for companies like TurboTax to exist.
Sure.
What?
And she wants the IRS itself to prepare everybody's taxes and just send them a bill, or really just collect their taxes directly from their bank accounts and in effect run their own tax preparation software and get rid of all private provision of these things. Mm-hmm. And so I had just written an article the day before, and I was saying, I don't think the government can do this. They can't do anything. They can't manage anything. Look at the ACH. Or
I wouldn't trust them to do it.
Yeah, the ACA website, the Obamacare website, for example.
Sure.
They can't even run a freaking website. So, the idea that we're going to trust them with this job is terrible. And it's going to default to basically government owns all our income and give us back what they think we deserve,
Well,
so it's so funny that the very next day, the only website that the IRS runs, just to take payments, that's it, completely collapsed on tax day. But it was It was hilarious.
Well, I mean, that's
using PayPal.
Yeah, I mean that's the beautiful thing. A phrase that we say on the show all the time is that it's really easy for us as libertarians to argue our positions. We believe the principles we believe, and that's beautiful. But it's not just the principles. It's that government is just so bad at everything it does that then it's easy for us to say, "Well, see, there you go." And I mean, I wish I didn't have to be right so often. But you're correct that they're so bad at what they do. They can't even rob us properly or on time.
It's beautiful.
It reminds me as well. Here in Tennessee, it's getting around end of year testing time, for the public schools.
My kids are knee deep in.
Yeah, so the state of Tennessee spent something like $20 million on this web service called I think TN Ready, where the students log on and do what used to be TCAP assessments and things like that. And of course, guess what happens after spending $20 million for some firm to build your web program? Guess what happens on test day? The site crashes and no one can do their tests. If we were a private business and we spent that kind of money, which we wouldn't, but if we spent that kind of money on some sort of service to build us a web platform and it crashed, we want our money back. I mean, it would be they would go out of business. That firm would go out of business because they would be ruined. Only in government can they be that profoundly terrible at what they do, but they don't go out of business the next day.
There's no competition. I guess that's the very essence of what government is. It's not voluntary, and there's no competitors to it. So, which by itself should cause us to say, well, why don't we get rid of it? I mean,
exactly.
I actually think that's the real answer.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting shorter on time, so I want to make sure we get to a couple of important things. So for upcoming events where people can see the excellent Jeffrey Tucker, first here, I guess we're just a little over a week out, is Libertopia. That's in San Diego?
That's in San Diego, yeah. I'm headed out next week to be there. I'm the MC of the program. I'm really excited about it. I think this is going to be the biggest year yet for Libertopia. It's just a good time. It's funny. The Liberty movement is actually undergoing something of a revival right now. They went to a massive recession after 2012, and then we dealt with the alt-right problem, then we dealt with the alt-left problem, and we dealt with this problem, that problem. Now we have a smarter, better trained, more active and engaged and creative liberty movement that we've ever had before. And so as a result, we have these conferences around the country. Libertopia is, I think, the premier conference on the far west coast. We still have, of course, Freedom Fest, which has its own virtues and failings, I suppose, and then Pork Fest, on the East Coast in New Hampshire. So I'm going to be at both of those things.
Yeah,
all three of those things actually.
I was going to bring up that one next. So Pork Fest, which is in June 19th to 24th. So the gold standard is actually going to be at Pork Fest. We're going to have a time slot, I believe, on that Wednesday, but I'll have to double check. So so we'll get the chance to meet in person, which is excellent.
I'll be there. I'm coming in very late Friday night because I have to be in Grand Rapids for a different thing, but I'm flying in late, getting there, and I'll be there all day Saturday and Sunday. So
you see that I've only been invited to one thing. That's the difference between us. Well, I mean, and you're right, and that's an entire other episode worth the conversation. That when you talk about the liberty movement, and that can be vague, but I like using that phrase just because instead of nitpicking about ANCAP, voluntarist, anarchist, libertarian, minarchist, whatever, I can just say the liberty movement.
Yeah, that's good.
And
I agree with that too, because I really do think that we have to learn to have a big tent, a big umbrella. Yeah, we all want a freer world, so that's all that matters.
Well, I want to sort of close a little bit on that subject. That the liberty movement has had some lean years, I would say, in the past few years, definitely after 2012. I've heard people say that there's definitely factors. There's the Trump factor. There's the maybe not having a really strong central figure that's sort of the face or the name of the movement right now. I don't necessarily know if there's any one cause, but I definitely have been pessimistic as of late that the liberty movement can be less of just a cyclical excitement around presidential elections and more of a long-term sustained cultural movement, and then that politics will follow. So what do you feel like, and I love giving people really open-ended rhetorical questions right at the end. What do you feel like are the most positive and best ways that people like us can help the liberty movement as opposed to help politician X?
Well, first of all, I think it's good we don't have a central figure. I think that's really important because people too often outsource their own jobs to the guy they think is going to save the world. I was unhappy about the developments in 2008 and 2012 because I knew it was going to lead to a kind of demoralization. But now that that's set in, that's good because you see people working in all areas, whether it's in technology or in podcasting like you're doing, or writing or organizing local events, national conferences. I think all this stuff is essential. I'm going to suggest something to you that I haven't written yet, but I plan to do it in the next few days. And I hope you're not shocked by this, but I think everyone should join the Libertarian Party.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now, see, I want you to share your thoughts with me because you're our guest, but I will preface your thoughts with, I'm not an enemy of the LP, but I have been pretty harsh on them on this show because we always want the people that are supposed to, whatever that means. Yeah. We want the people that are supposed to represent our movement to be the best. I mean, we expect the best out of who represents us.
They never will be.
Yeah.
I mean, LP, and I say that people should join the LP despite everything, you know. And I'm not even saying that you should vote or vote LP. I just think that it would be send a signal to the national press and to the national culture in general to see the membership rolls of that party growing. I think it's the best single way that people can assess the seriousness of the liberty movement, to see the membership rolls of the LP go. Look, we've got an LP. Maybe if I had been there in '72, I would have argued against it, but it exists. Mm-hmm. It's got an infrastructure. It's out there. The principles are nicely drawn. They don't always have the best candidates. There's a lot of incompetence. There's weird factions. There's all kinds of things. But $50 and you can join the party and send a signal. To me, it's like we're looking for ways to be rebels, but also be safe.
Yeah.
And this, to me, is a way you can express a form of rebellion. It doesn't mean you have to agree with whoever gets the nomination. It doesn't mean you have to go out and vote. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that you're in a small way adding to a kind of rebellion that can actually make a difference. And I'm not even optimistic that the libertarians could ever win a single election. But I think that it's a symbolic thing more than anything else. And also it's something that we can actually do. And it's not hard. It's not expensive. And it can make a difference. So that's my argument. I haven't written my article yet. I'm going to write it. Because and also I haven't voted since 1984. I don't even believe it. I've never been a member of a political party, but I joined it the other day. And the strange thing is that I feel good about it. You know, I feel good. I feel like I did something. Yeah, that's great. It's hard for us as libertarians to find something to actually do. This is something that's easy to do, and it makes you feel good. So that's maybe it's a simple-minded argument, but that's all it is.
See,
I disagree with that.
See, I've taken the position pretty hard line as of late that if I'm concerned, I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but I have serious concerns when that there's always such a counterculture movement, and some people that feel that counterculture movement may find themselves in the Libertarian Party because they're looking for a place to rebel, but they don't really understand libertarian principles in even a basic way. And so I'm always waffling between the two positions of, well, I'm not going to get too hung up on being associated with people that don't even know what the NAP means, versus, but it is really nice to have a community, right? Like it's nice to be able to point and say, okay, but this is our camp. This is where I mean, if for nothing else than to network with other like-minded folks, right?
Well, I think that's right. And you can actually have a role in educating people. And again, I'm not even saying you have to go to the conventions, you have to hang out at the parties, you don't. But at least, you have an opportunity to that way. I mean, try it out. Maybe you'll find somebody you like. Maybe you'll hate everybody but one person, but that's at least one new person in life that you can hang out with and have fun. So, I don't know. I think there's something to it. And it doesn't mean, I've also argued against, I want to get rid of the pledge. I think the pledge is a little creepy and weird. Like, we shouldn't have to sign a pledge, to join a political party. But
I had that.
You had that right there.
We
He had it in his show notes.
It was in the show notes. We didn't get there. I was going to ask you.
I think the pledge is weird, but despite the pledge, I think it's just something. I'm just going to propose that that we need things to do as libertarians, and this is one thing that we can do, and it's such an obvious thing, but I don't think people write about it enough. Again, I'm not even suggesting you go out and vote. I probably never will. Much less support particular candidates. I mean, people run for office are just weird in general, On the other hand, it's an infrastructure. It's out there. The national press is paying attention to it. We got something like 4.5 million votes in the last presidential election. It seems like that made a difference, and I think we could make a big difference if the LP got half a million new members. That would just be phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, I won't argue with that. I definitely fall into the camp of people that would say that if all you can do today is argue with other libertarians about who the most pure libertarian is, you'll quickly find that we've made the joke on the show before that there's only like 17 libertarians in the world. So I mean, and those 17 have been split into 10 different camps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in that sense, the LP is implausible. And again, I don't even believe in politics. But it's kind of fun. I admire the people who have stuck it out after all these years to keep that party together. And, and I don't know. The platform is generally pretty good. It's not perfect. There's all kind of ways I would improve it. But I appreciate anything that's like trying to do something. I kind of find myself being sympathetic with it these days.
Sure. Well, I think
we're good.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right.
Jeffrey Tucker, ladies and gentlemen,
yes,
that is, I'm going to go back up to the browser here really quick, AIER.org, American Institute for Economic Research. Please check it out. Check out Jeffrey's articles and Rightwing Collectivism, The Other Threat to Liberty. We're going to have links to all those things on the show notes. Jeffrey, I'm such a fan. You've done me such a huge service today by being on the show, and I mean, I definitely think this was the most informed cryptocurrency conversation there's ever been.
We might have to have him back for a cryptocurrency episode.
If we haven't scared you off, we're gonna have that Bitcoin discussion, but it won't be today.
To talk about in crypto land. So yeah, have me back.
There'll be plenty. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being on the show today. We appreciate it so much. I look forward to
seeing you at PorkFest.
Yes, well, I will definitely see you there. And so once again, everybody, thegoldstandardpodcast.com, facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley, and Twitter is @Alan M. Mosley. We good?
Right. We're good to go.
Join us next week.
Yeah,
we'll see you next time. You're welcome.